Hi, it's Jessie. I'm back again, and I had to compose myself and come back. There were some things that needed clarity, right? I talked about how the Jewish people are held up by these pillars, With Judaism, there are three pillars, and those are Torah, prayer, and good deeds, right? And we say that these things keep them in the good graces of God, right? When you're in the good graces of God, your land is fruitful, your world is at peace, you know. But when you're not in the good graces of God, everything goes bad. And the Jews, they kind of see everything that goes bad in their world as coming from God. So everything, whether good or bad, comes from God. And everything is about getting back in His good graces. And the way that you do this is through following the law, prayer, and through good deeds, right? Over here in Islam, they got some other pillars, what keeps them in good grace, And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the Jews say that Muslims are the only other group of people who have their own connection with God. So I need to mention what their pillars are, and theirs are the declaration of faith, prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and pilgrimage. Okay? Now, if you don't have this connection with God, if you don't have this spiritual thing, right? Um, what are you left with? What else is there? You know? How do you know what is right and what is wrong? People speak and they say a lot of things, and it's real hard to measure, um, like when someone is misguiding you, when someone's exploiting your ignorance, when the Jews, when they were attacked by Amalek, that this is their mortal enemy, he's to be remembered for all times as their mortal enemy, because Amalek attacked in the rear where they were weak in the law, you know, where they didn't know well enough, where he could come in and exploit them, and what he really wanted to do was sodomize them, ain't that something where the enemy comes in and he always uses sexual perversion. He always wants to do the thing that is most grotesque with God. He wants to sodomize you. He attacks where you don't know any better. He leaves you really screwed, right? In other words, pardon my French. But that's the typical expression, right? Um, when you're not strong in these things, when you're not strong in law and faith and what needs to be done, then the enemy can come in and he can tell you, he can whisper lies to you like, those people are undeserving of what they have. Go take it from them. I want what they have. They don't deserve it. Go take it from them. The enemy can come in with lies and he can dominate you. He can mislead you by playing on your sense of justice. He plays on your sense of righteousness every time that he gets you. And you're the one who comes out looking like the bad guy for it, while he reaps the rewards of your labor. It's a horrible thing, because evil always extends its life by eating other people. And if you don't know what is right, you know, charity is good. It is good to honor people. It's good to respect people. It's good to mind your boundaries and build yourself to believe that God has something for you, that you don't need to take it from someone else, that this is your inheritance in God, and when you want more, then you have to become more. Um, you have to become more charitable. You have to become a better teacher for your neighbors. You have to develop your character and your community, because everyone rises together, right? And if you're rising at the top, then you should be helping people along the way to get in line with what is good and what is of God. So out here in the world where people gain power by pointing fingers and seeing who they can devour. It's a different thing. This enemy has some teeth, but they're not righteous teeth. They're not the white teeth of God, right? Um, there's these scriptures that say that the wicked's teeth will be broken. They won't be able to eat people anymore, right? And I look forward to that day. And do we see signs of it out in the world? Well, Biden says, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but this is just like one example of speaking when you don't know where you're speaking from or where you're going. So I need to confront this so that I can remain upright and open your eyes and maybe help the scales fall off them. It's not about taking you down or eating you, but helping you to rather grow and come to some understanding, right? Now, when the church had teeth before, its people was supposed to be protected, right? They were conquerors. They went through many a crusades and did many a horrible things, and then came back to mock and taunt the Jewish people of how they were defeated and almost wiped out. But that's besides the point. When the religion had teeth, you see, everybody followed what the leaders said. Everybody followed, like the Pope, right? Right now, the Pope is advocating for peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine is like, no, no, not going to happen, but he's pushing for it. And I believe that in America, we're over here also pushing for the no. And when our leader is the same guy who's saying you need a come to Jesus moment, you have to recognize what you're bringing people into before you get on there, because in this moment where the Pope is saying one thing and you're saying another, in your faith, you risk being excommunicated. And I know they don't excommunicate people very often anymore because they don't have teeth. But this was how they used to keep people in line and keep people in order and getting people to follow them and follow their ways, their laws, And it bears witness, when you have a position in direct opposition to the leader of your faith, it says something. You're saying, come to Jesus, but who holds the seat of St. Peter? Jesus said, you're my rock, and on you I'll build my church, So here we have the guy who's sitting in the seat of St. Peter, and this is the church that Jesus is building, and you're saying no. And this isn't your only position where you're saying no. You're also saying no when it comes to things like abortion. In the church, they would excommunicate a nun for approving of abortions, You're advocating for legal protection for the entire nation to have abortions. You're advocating to make it not illegal. So the Pope is not excommunicating you for it. You're not following his lead. He's the one who's sitting in the seat of St. Peter. You're supposed to be under his tutelage. So when you're saying, come to Jesus, what is Jesus doing? I mean, really, because we have this idea in Christianity that you believe in Jesus, you can do whatever you want. And that really isn't the case. If that's what you believe, then it's not that you believe in Jesus, right? Because there's a hierarchy in your faith, right? And I'm aware that there's been many splits and divisions. My mom was a devout Catholic most of her life, but they banned her from receiving communion because she got a divorce. Way back in the old days when the church had teeth, if you get a divorce, they're not excommunicating you, but you can't receive communion anymore. And what's the whole purpose of going to Mass but to receive the communion? It's not the 7-minute homily that you're going for. It's not just the community that you're going for. It is to receive the body and blood of Christ, right? The little wafer and the wine, right? But no, and maybe this was why my mom made us, Christmas and Easter Catholics, but this was the way that it was. It was a way of discouraging people from ever getting a divorce again. Now, divorce is minor, right? More than 50% of Americans get divorced, right? Here we're dealing with a separate issue called abortion, where, I'm not in favor of abortion. And it's not because, I was raised Catholic. It's because I believe that if God puts life in you, that there is purpose for it. I believe that God gives children for your redemption. I believe that if you cut off the child, you may lose your redemption. I have deep beliefs about abortion, and it's got nothing to do with the Catholic Church. I don't care what the Pope says. My faith is because I'm in communion with God, not because I go to church and I eat the wafer. I haven't done that in decades. It's because I am who I am. Because I have thought what is pleasing to God my whole life. God is the creator and giver of life. The purpose of children is, to bring redemption, and this doesn't mean we put our guilt on them, So what I'm getting at is not just think before you speak, but know what you're a part of. And if you're a part of something, if you believe in something, then you go with this something. Now, my mom, she eventually left the Catholic Church, right? She became a Baptist. My mom, she had a big gambling habit. She absolutely loved the boat, If you were a gambling person with the Baptists or a drinker, if you abused any kind of substance, you had any kind of addiction whatsoever, you could not stay with them. They would also put you out. There is this tendency out in the world to believe that you could be this and be this. But you can't be both because you're not the Pope, right? You're not the head of the church. You don't get to choose. And I know in America we have freedom of religion, which means you can't put your religion on other people. However, there are many other, many other character building techniques that are expressed in the church, meaning charity and community, meaning like evangelization. So all these things that are a problem, where we have all these disagreements up high of what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is a lie, all these things up here, if we settled the things down below, we'd be in a much better place. But we can't really settle the things down below because we're too up high, floating. It's like the arrogance of Israel, floating ideas where we think that we're more than we are. We forget that we have to do the work. The thing about the Jewish people is that salvation is passed down from one generation to another, which is a big part of why children are your redemption, because salvation runs in your blood, right? The thing with the outside world, salvation is something that you have to earn. It's not a guaranteed right, which is why the Christian church is such an important feature in the world, because it offers this promise of salvation, and it tells you if you believe. But it's more than just if you believe, because if you're going to be a part of something, you have to know what else to believe, right? And if you're not believing the what else that your leaders, the standards that your leaders are setting forth, then you're in trouble, right? So I can say I can govern without saying I forbid abortions, because I can tell you that if we develop character down here and we teach people to value each other and not devour each other, when we teach people that, to be celibate, to honor one another, that sex is not a pastime, it is a sacred union that's supposed to come between a husband and a wife, right? When we give people good morals, when we give them good values, when we instill these things from the time they're young until they grow up, when we're not teaching sex ed in 5th grade, about how to put a condom on a banana, how to use birth control, what abortion services are available to you for after you're pregnant. When we stop making it a part of the guidance counselor's job to steer girls to abortion, when we stop living this way and start making investments in people and become a country where people want to belong, then people make contributions back. They want to belong to something. You have to set standards along the way. And when you set standards along the way, you don't have to clean up your mess. Now, over in Israel, they believe in abortion too, And like I said, it's not for me to govern them, It's not. They have to choose what is right for them. It is their own salvation in their own hands, Oh, the light went off. But let me get a drink. On the other hand, they're teaching their young girls to dress modestly. They're teaching their young people to learn the rules of a relationship and not just jump in them. I was watching this Netflix documentary where this young couple were dating, and the first thing they said to each other was, what are the rules with us? What are the standards? How do we treat one another? What's the expectations? How are we going to get along? If you can't get this basic premise down, you can't move forward. No surprises. We're not seeing where something goes. You're not moving me with manipulation. We're not driven by our desires, by our hunger, by our hormones, but rather we're establishing standards in the beginning, and we're understanding that this is the point, no further. The sex is something that belongs in, marriage. It's the benefit of marriage. And I know rabbis will tell you that we're free as adults, it's not really a sin unless it's cheating on a spouse, I know there are some rabbis who would tell you consenting adults, it's okay. But still at the same point, you can't lose your standards from teaching the young these things to when you get old. It is never okay to relax your standards, Love, it's never satisfied unless it's giving. So when we get to this point where we want to take from one another, then we're not really engaging in a pattern of love, right? It's more a pattern of lust. And when we get into these lustful things, we find ourselves at our end. When we start consuming people for life, we find ourselves at the end. We have abandoned Torah, we've abandoned our laws, we've abandoned, prayer and good deeds, and we've said, just let me eat. And you eat, and you're never satisfied, When you stay within the law, you eat and you find satisfaction because you do things right, And the Jews, they have this thing where they think they transform the world, or believe they transform the world. Think is a bad word, sorry. Don't mean to be disrespectful. They believe that they transform the world through the foods that they eat, which is a big reason why they don't eat pork, and why they eat certain foods at certain times, and why they have 4 glasses of wine here, and they have all these different rules in food for how they're going to transform the world. But it's more than food. It's about how are we going to relate to each other, So when I say it's wrong to say have a come to Jesus moment, you're not teaching them right. You're not offering them better. I'm not saying it's because they're absolutely better. They have their own ways of being, right? They have their own faults and their own misdeeds. And coming to Jesus is not going to fix it for them. The Christian church is just a mess. The church that Jesus built, Pope sits in his seat of St. Peter, right? The church that Jesus built is a mess. It's an absolute disaster. And I couldn't advocate for people to say, come to Jesus. In good conscience, I couldn't advocate for people to say, come to Jesus. You know? And it's got nothing to do with whoever anybody else is. It's a matter of, you have to come back to standards. You have to come back to good deeds. You have to come back to prayer. You know, you have to come back to building yourself. You know, to not believing that you make yourself more by consuming someone else. You have to come back. You know, you can't get ahead that way. You can't bring Netanyahu into submission by telling him come to Jesus. That's just not going to work. The church is a mess. You got to clean your own house, you know? You understand what I mean? How do you fix the problem in the church? I can't fix it. That's why I tell you, I have my own covenant. I understand the mess that's there. I was partially raised in it, went to grad school with it. I understand the mess there. You know, when I was at my hardest part in life, around 2008, 2009, when I wanted to give up, and I was like, I'm just going to go to church. And I went to Mass every single day. Every single day I went to Mass. Sunday through Sunday, I went to Mass. 8:30 in the morning, I was in church. Yes, I went to Mass every day. And I just prayed. And I was like, God, help me. God, help me. God, pull me through this thing. Help me out of it. You know, the worst things. And you know what happened in this church? I found people who wanted to eat me. The lady who I made my godmother, the godmother of my children, she had no idea what happened in my life before I got there, but she automatically assumed I was the problem. And the first time she heard that the children's father had been in prison, she never spoke to me again after that. Why would she never speak to me again? Why? Because she had done something wrong to me based on a narrative that was not my own. And once she got a hint that she had been lied to, then I lose the relationship. That's not the only thing that happened back then. I had a deacon that he was intelligent. I loved to ask him questions. Me and Deacon Ed could talk for hours. His wife, Carol, however, hated me. I was with her in Sunday school. Yeah, I went to Sunday school too because I got confirmed, you know, in my adulthood. Because I thought that was the way. But you know, one Sunday, I took my son out because I had him in Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, and we were selling popcorn. And Carol called the police. And then the next Sunday, in church, in Sunday school, in front of everybody else, she talked to me like I had did some major crime because I had my son out there selling popcorn for Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. I keep mixing the two. But do you understand what I'm saying? This was the deacon's wife. She didn't just call the police on me and my son, so they came rolling up like we were criminals. You know, you don't roll up on a little kid. You know, what's wrong with you? And then you want to embarrass me in church the next Sunday by outright calling me a criminal. What is wrong with you? All I did was fundraise for Cub Scouts. Over and over and over again in this church, people picked their little quarrels with me, and I didn't understand what was going on. See, because when you're in the church, you think that you leave your sins at the door and everything is about Jesus and building a better world. But it's not, because the same people saying Jesus are the same people eating you for nothing. The same people jumping on the bandwagon. They talk about persecution of Christians in the end times, but I'm sorry, but the Christians were the ones who persecuted me, you know, from the start. Do you know what you're bringing people into when you say you need to come to Jesus moment? The church is a mess. They got no standards. They're eating each other. Don't tell people come to Jesus. Don't. It's not going to save them. It's going to make the problems worse, you know? I'm just saying that you have to be mindful of what you're in. because it's ridiculous. Right? How much time? I got 5 minutes left. Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to get worked up. Go off on a tangent, right? So when we say, let's get back to my original point where we're talking about spiritual power, right? How do they have their spiritual power? With the pillars of their faith. Prayer, law, good deeds. Go over here. You got a declaration of faith. You got prayer. You got almsgiving. You got fasting. Deny your flesh, right? You got pilgrimage, right? Out here in the world is deception. It's deception and eating one another because we forget to put these things first. We forget to make these our standards, to fall into this hierarchy and to look at the world and say, even if you believe differently than I believe, I'm not going to hold it against you. I'm going to embrace you as my brother, and I'm going to set you on the right path, not by telling you abortion is wrong, you're a murderer, but I'm going to set you on the right path by letting you know that, hey, we have to keep these standards when we're young, that we don't want to get ourselves in trouble. We want to keep sex sacred as a union between two people. We want to keep it sacred to be in the benefit of marriage. We don't want to use it as a pastime, because when we start dwindling down this way, when sex is our entertainment, we are in real trouble. And if we can't open our eyes, then maybe we come to this place of Sodom and Gomorrah, where fire rains down on us. Now, I know Jesus said that he saw the world on fire and how he wishes it was burning already, But I also saw the world on fire. And it made me think for a long time. I thought, because Moses, he saw the bush on fire, right? But the bush was on fire without being consumed. To be on fire and to not be consumed. To be on fire and to not be destroyed. Maybe the point isn't about bringing the world into destruction, but maybe the point is to bring the world into a better place while we're on fire here. While we're sitting here devouring each other, while we're sitting here backstabbing and, backbiting and just pulling each other down to get ahead, we can stop right here while the world is burning, and we can choose to build right where we are and say, we're not going to be like this. We're not going to be like this, I can no more say that they need a peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine than I can say that the fighting needs to stop between Israel and Gaza. And before anybody jumps down my throat for that, I don't believe in war. I don't support war. I don't back war. What you see is an extreme reaction out there. It is war. It is a war that someone else launched. And I'm one who believes that you don't throw stones at somebody and not expect something back in return. You don't pick a fight like this. And no, it's not okay that the people are suffering. Yeah, I am torn in this. But if I was the people there, I'd consider where I'm living. Egypt won't let me in. Egypt won't give me refuge. Why won't Egypt give me refuge? Is it something with my character? Are we unleadable people? Is it because our leadership is bad? I'd start right where I am. Yeah, we're burning and we're on fire. But how do we make it different? How do we reconcile back with God? We're Muslims over here, right? It's Ramadan, right? It's getting back to God. So how are we going to do it? We're going to say what we believe. We're going to have our declaration of faith. We're going to pray to God. They have their own spiritual power. That's what the Jews say, right? We're going to start being charitable. We have nothing to give. So maybe we'll give our own hands to somebody else to lift them up, to bring something back for them. You see everybody fighting when the aid trucks come. To think of your neighbor while all this fighting is going on and say, you take this, God will provide. To have faith, fasting, deny your flesh, and put your brother in front of you, When you start being this kind of person who lifts up those around you, I know everything's been stripped from you. Everything was stripped from me too. But when you start being the kind of person that chooses to embrace the pillars of your faith, then you'll be the kind of person that God stands with and God brings out and God lifts up and God restores, And you won't find these closed borders where you have no place to rest your head. And some people might think it's crappy of me to say that, right? They might think, how dare I use faith like that? But let's back up for a minute, because I actually have my own spiritual connection too. So when the Jews say that the Muslims have their own spiritual connection, and I know what the spiritual connection meant for the Jews, because I relate to their ancestors fully. I know the spiritual power that they have. And I know that God, He does rain manna from heaven. He will cause stuff to sprout out for you. He will bring a harvest for you. He will make the land produce for you. But there are certain premises. You can't abandon your faith, and you got to get back with it. I can't do nothing about the war. I don't want to be in the middle of that. Both sides are wrong. Both sides are right. But if we stop, if we cease fire for a moment and try to get back to doing what is right, returning to do what is right, return to that belief that everything that came to us, God sent to us, then maybe, just maybe, we can move on in peace and never get back to this war, right? Because we